This episode of The Casual is brought to you in part by Squarespace. For all your website needs, Squarespace delivers it in an all-around package to help you build a beautiful, integrated online presence. What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Reggie Casual, and welcome to Unscripted once again. And today, we're talking about saving money, because everyone likes to do that. Save money. It's always good. Yes, building your brand on a budget. That's what we're talking about. But it may not be what you think. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's not what you think. So, let's go ahead and get this started. So typically what I've seen here on YouTube is whenever someone gives advice on building a brand on a budget or with $0, it usually amounts to how to get started for cheap. There's nothing wrong with doing it cheap if you're trying to go volume, but building a brand on a budget doesn't have to mean cheap. It means eliminating wasteful spending and understanding the costs associated with each stage of the process. So, what is the process? List time. Quite simply, the fashion process is development, infrastructure, marketing, manufacturing, and sales. And then there's some bits in between and afterwards, but essentially that's the nuts and bolts, baby. The key to building a brand on a budget is treating each part of the process independently. And guess what? This is not something I made up. This is common industry practice, because here's the secret that most don't realize until the moment. All brands are built on a budget. Dun dun. There's a development budget, marketing budget, production budget, etc., what have you. And even big fashion houses have a limited amount of cash flow. Comparably, it's much higher than what you may have to start, but the concept is still the same, which means you need to methodically go through each process one by one because you're just starting. And this ensures you're not trying to spend money in areas that really aren't important at the moment. For example, you really shouldn't be worrying about your marketing budget while you're in the development stage. That has nothing to do with what you're doing right now. You're just trying to develop. Just focus on development, and once you're finished, then you move on. And really the next part is infrastructure. So you really shouldn't be worried about marketing until you're absolutely ready. We'll be here all day if we talk about every part of the process. So today we're gonna mostly talk about development, the very first part of the process. But before we get ahead of ourselves and before we go too into the details, let's get in a word from our sponsor, Squarespace. In the fashion industry, the competition is fierce and your presentation has to look solid from jump. That's where Squarespace comes in. Beautifully designed templates, easy to use web building tools, and social integration make Squarespace the perfect choice for the budding entrepreneur or even the savvy professional. Plus, by using our link, squarespace.com/thecasual, you could save 10% when you start. So get that business off the ground the right way and use Squarespace today. All right, so let's talk development. Let's break out another one of those lists. There we are. Development is the creative part of your potential brand. It's the part where you design pretty much everything from the clothes to the philosophy to the customer profile. It's where most designers are most comfortable because it's what they excel at. They're good at this part and it's fun. Now, what are the costs associated at the development stage? Well, without getting too much into the weeds, it's your samples. Your samples, the pieces that you make before you actually start manufacturing. No matter what genre of fashion you decide to design in, samples are going to be the first cost, one of the first costs that you'll have to deal with. But beyond being simply an example of a potential piece, they serve as the first view of your physical product and will subsequently be used in your marketing materials even before you begin production. That's right, your lookbooks, showcases, promo material, maybe runway stuff, even the product image on your future site will very likely be your final samples. And again, this isn't unique, I'm not making this up. Big fashion labels do this all the time. If you think all those clothes that you see on the runway are already produced and manufactured, you got another thing coming, because they're not. Virtually all those pieces are final samples. It's the very reason fashion weeks are nearly 6 months before anything releases and not 6 weeks. Because note, a budget also means determining what the actual amount you're willing to spend is, which is usually based on what kind of clothes you're going to make. Don't just say, I want cheap, budget is cheap. It's not cheap, it's a number. Make a number. Considering you can spend anywhere from $75 USD to upwards of thousands of dollars on a sample depending on its complexity, there are a multitude of options. You could get your samples produced by an agency, which would usually cost a bit more, but they're usually more adept at making samples. Or you could get a potential manufacturer to produce your sample. In fact, getting your sample done by a manufacturer is a great testing ground for who best illustrates your work. Or you could invest your time and learn how to make the garments yourself, which is the ultimate flex and the easiest way to control the entire creative process. And you'll save the most money because you'll have the skill to do the work by yourself. Plenty of designers, especially at the technical level, have this option by default. So if you don't, you might wanna consider learning how to make your own clothes. Another way to save on samples is to truncate your initial offering. As in, don't make a ton of pieces for your first collection. Like, plenty of labels do this. They start with like 2 pieces or even a single piece. Now you may think this is counterproductive. I'm trying to make a collection, man. I'm trying to have people like all my stuff. Yeah, but it may be too much. And most brands actually started with this approach. Even the historically relevant ones that you know today. Louis Vuitton, they started with trunks. Levi's denim jeans, Coach wallets and billfolds. You get the point. Some of the most storied labels out there focused on one particular product. And by focusing in on a particular product, you not only can set the tone for your label, but you can also set a standard that you can continue to improve upon, which could increase your profit margins later along down the line. You essentially become known for the particular thing that you do, which will be far better for marketing in the future because people will come to you for that particular thing. Quite simply, you'll have less worries about cash flow because you're only worrying about one stage of the process, that is development. Also, the sample you make will serve as great assets once you get to the marketing and manufacturing stage, like we said before. Your profit margins will also be much larger as a result. And if you employ the pre-order trick, you can save the headache of worrying about manufacturing costs. The pre-order trick, you say? What is that, Reggie? What is the pre-order trick? Well, it's a bit further ahead in this process, but the pre-order trick is not necessarily a trick. It's a common practice for new cash-strapped labels that may have a sizable following but lack sufficient cash to produce the end product. What it essentially is that after you do your marketing stage, which is further along down the line, admittedly, and you've done some substantial promotion and outreach with your samples, like lookbooks, runways, events, whatever what have you, you stage a pre-sale via your sales channel, which is likely to be your online site. You set a time limit, usually a few months, which is usually based on the response that you receive from your pieces via your marketing. You set a stock amount. 200 is usually pretty good depending on your manufacturer's minimum. Wait for orders to come in and use that money that you got from those pre-orders to pay your manufacturers. It's far more intense than what I just described there, and it sounds ridiculously easy, but it actually requires some damn good marketing. So easier said than done, but that is essentially the pre-order trick. Because one thing you'll have to do is market and promote well before production. And that's why you should tackle each part of the process independently, because each part might take some cash, which is why the only way to build a brand on a budget is to actually set a budget. All we covered here is the development part of the process, sample making and mitigating the cost during sample making. We haven't talked about fabrics or anything. But in order to really get a grip on budgeting, we gotta do this in parts, and that's what we're gonna do. We're really gonna dive deep into it. And of course, this is just the Cliff Notes version of this episode. If you want the inside track on development, all members on YouTube and on Patreon will get even more on overtime episodes. So don't sleep. But I recognize some of you out there are actually in the process of making brands and have some more info that others would probably like to know. So I want you to let everybody know those in the comments. And of course, if you have questions that you want answered, state those in the comments as well. They may be answered in a future episode of Unscripted. But most importantly, you know what it is, keep it casual. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. See you guys on Overtime.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Give a thumbs up if you liked the video. Follow on Instagram for the latest out of Japan and beyond. And if you want even more content and business tips, all you gotta do is become a member right here on YouTube or Patreon at patreon.com/TheCasual. But most importantly, keep it locked right here for all of your info on international street fashion and culture from Tokyo. It's your boy, and keep it casual. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu.